one form of reflection that occurs that actually, does work in America. And here, I'm a Pete Seeger, Bob Dylan, John Steinbeck, Bruce Springsteen kind of American. Isn't America terrible? Except, gosh, I'm here on this beautiful night looking out here with this girl in my hand driving this car, and you wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm utterly romantic about the United States for all my cynicism, like them. There's a mix. There's cynics who are just frustrated romantics anyway. And I think the great thing we just saw with Obama is a fundamental lesson about America that's easy to forget systemically, which is it corrects. It corrected through Red Scares after World War I, which were totally unfair and unjust, and it corrected, and the people who perpetuated that were thrown out of office. It got rid of McCarthy, which was a blot on the thing because he overreached. We survived Nixon and Watergate. We survived Vietnam. We survived all kinds of Cold War excesses. And we'll survive the excesses of George W. Bush and the neoconservatives. And already it's changed. Look what happened. And all in a blink of a historical eye. These guys are thrown out of every level, thrown out of the Senate and the House. The think tank guys are discredited. The political guys are discredited. And then the Republican Party just this morning was having a real argument, a good one, between the right wing, Rush Limbaugh guys, and the Colin Powell moderate guys, my bunch, for control of the party. It's beginning to have a fight. That's what you should do when you're out of power. That's how you reflect. You start with a postmortem. What went wrong? We have no control of anything. We did something wrong. And there's nothing like numbers. All the apparatchiks in parties know only one thing. They're not in the majority anymore. All the people who don't care because they're not getting to do the jobs they want to do. That's a wonderful moment for reflection. And losing is the best thing that can happen to you to make you reflect. One of the problems with the Grand Coalition here is nobody really lost. The SPD didn't have to think, okay, for Schroeder, how much of us are really in favor of the Hartz agenda? Well, we're still in government. We're pitching. We're out there. The problem is that they didn't have to go through a postmortem. And I mean, it is an argument to be in opposition. It forces you to think brave thoughts because you knew what you did didn't work. So that's one wonderful thing I think that's happened in America is that Obama couldn't have been elected if there hadn't been Bush and the craziness before. I honestly don't believe. I think he would have had to wait his 8 years and the normal system would have kicked in. Because it didn't, people were willing to take a chance on this obviously bright young guy because Bright looked really good. Thoughtful and nuanced looked pretty good after neoconservatives' lack of thoughtfulness and nuance. So that's one way. The other thing that really works in America, and here I give the neoconservatives credit, the think tank communities are there. Differently than here, the people in think tanks can honestly say they are likely to be assistant secretaries of state, a deputy secretary of defense, the head of the NSC, often as a think tank, Brzezinski and Kissinger, often academic think tank type folks. And so there's this whole cottage industry around Washington that gives advice on policy constantly to government, looks back at what went wrong and what went right. And the reason that they're listened to, at least partly, is that they could very well be your boss in a cycle if you're a congressman. They could be the NSA director for whatever. And so they could hold a real position. So you're treated much more as an equal than in the think tank community here, where none of the think tank people are ever going to go into government or ever going to run the cabinet or ever going to have anything. They're much more academic, whereas in America, they're much more about policy. All that you're asked in America, it was new to me when I came from Britain, where I went to university. What do you want me to do, John? I liked you on TV, very clever speech. Tell me what you want me to do in bullet points, and then we'll talk more. And that is a great way to reflect. I mean, that's how the Heritage Foundation did that with Reagan. The Republicans said, the Democrats control all the think tanks, we need our own. Let's create our own structure. Now the Democrats have said that the Republican think tanks are better than ours, so let's create the Center for American Progress, which is modeled on the Heritage Foundation, a very right-wing think tank, because they said the model works. So they're learning from each other constantly. The Republicans say, we need to use the internet better. That's the one thing they all say right now, like Obama. So you learn the techniques from the other guys. But the main thing is policy. When I have discussions here, I say, okay, what would you do? This is your broad historical, meta-historical analysis of Europe. What would you do if you're talking to the German chancellor? And honestly, the people say to me, well, I don't have to do that, so I don't think like that. Then I would walk out if I were the German chancellor or a congressman and say, well, you're wasting my time. I'll read your book if I want to. But what I want is answers to policy questions. The American system, because the guys go in to government is much more policy driven. They know what that's like. It's what they do day to day. And it makes their analysis better because they're forced to say, John, what you said makes great sense in a perfect Cartesian enlightenment-driven world, but in the real world of interagency stuff, it will never work that way for these reasons. And so reality enters the analysis, and political power on the other side enters the think tank community. And because of that, they're listened to far more respectfully, because you never know when the guy that you're talking to, the bright young, my co-author of Godfather Doctrine, is 31 years old and runs his own think tank. He could very seriously be Secretary of State someday. People look at him and say, 25 years, this guy. So everyone's very polite, very nice. He's always amazed that people are nice to him. I laugh hysterically. But if you're a DC person, that's a very reasonable calculation to make. So it forces you to reflect. You've got this whole group of people whose whole job is to reflect, and they do make policy directly. They do directly get their ideas into the government. I see no reason why Germany can't do that. Historically, Germany has this wonderful academic background. We know the problems nowadays. It's not what it was. Yeah. But, I mean, there are think tanks out there. There are the Stiftung, which are under the thumb, of course, of the party. That could be changed. I think that would work. That's an innate German cultural thing. I don't see why that couldn't work. And boy, if I were going to start a new think tank, and I like my consulting firm just fine, but if I were to start a new think tank, it would be in Germany, and I'd just start doing it the American way here. I think the parliamentarians would like it. You can always throw the paper out if you don't like it. You know, they're still in charge, but you're a marketplace of ideas, and that's what's missing. You want somewhere where there are these ideas coming up. You may hate them. The Democrats read heritage stuff to find out what to be against, because the footnotes were right. So they'd read the same arguments and say, well, I totally disagree. But you had a discussion and reflection, as you're saying. And that to me is really a huge advantage. The think tanks here are, as somebody said to me, they're a university without students. And I said, what a waste of time. The only point of a university is to have students. And otherwise, be a think tank. Play in the arena. You're neither. And much as I've enjoyed being here, I mean, I have to say, it's a real problem.